Hello, this is Gabriel Custodiet of Watchman Privacy. Listen, I know why you're here. You're looking to escape the technocratic apparatuses that you see slowly enveloping you and restraining your freedom. In that case, the best thing you can do before listening to this episode is to visit escapethetechnocracy.com to purchase my privacy course on getting off the grid. This course is for everyone. It's the best privacy tutorial on the internet, and our shop has other things as well, books and toolkits and consulting, and we accept Monero and actual privacy throughout the checkout process. I do not take sponsors. I'm not part of a company. I don't have someone to answer to. So unlike 99.9% of the people who talk about their subject, you can know that I'm pursuing the unmitigated truth as I see it. Go support you and me at escapethetechnocracy.com. I'm very pleased to be joined by Dallas from PrivacyPost.io and WorldPost.io. This is my second conversation with Dallas. We're going to talk about basically having a secondary address, such as a mailbox. We're going to discuss South Dakota residency, maybe talk a little Portugal residency. And Dallas has set up these mail services that allow people to have this secondary address. And he has a lot of interesting privacy techniques that he has developed as a business along the way. Dallas, welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you, Gabe. Doing well. It's good to be back again.
It seems like some of you reached out to Dallas based on our previous episode, and I'll have that linked. Definitely go to that one. That will be much more of a primer for people interested in these topics. And so there does seem to be some kind of appetite, Dallas, so we can just spell it out a little bit more and see if we can get some more people headed your way, because you're providing a really valuable service. So let me just start by saying something, because we're discussing physical privacy by and large today, that is hiding our real name in most cases from where we go to sleep at night. So severing our real name from our address. And I think this is real privacy, to be honest. I don't see digital privacy as ultimate privacy. I think physical privacy is. And I think it's really sad that a lot of people are just talking about digital privacy without talking about this bigger issue. And I've always tried to focus on physical privacy first and foremost. And so that's what we're going to do on this topic. So let's just start, Dallas. Let's start by talking about mailboxes and secondary addresses. Then we can move on to South Dakota and maybe talk a little Portugal and some broader things. A little bit of a big picture question here, but I'm sure you have some things to say. Talk for a moment about, in the US, mailboxes, your mail, and third-party doctrine.
Okay, so third-party doctrine would be basically when you are using a cloud service or even any government services that is maintaining a database of your information, that can be accessed by any government agency without your knowledge or consent. And they can do several different aspects to that. They can hold the information infinitely. They can say, hey, we don't have a high threshold to do a search warrant yet. We want you not to delete anything that is deleted out of this service until we meet that threshold, so forth. So that's what the third-party doctrine is that whenever you have any information, your personal information in the cloud, provided by another third-party service, it is no longer your information. It's like putting garbage in your garbage bin and having it out street on garbage day. And if any police, any legal entity wants to search through that, or I guess any lawyer or whatever wants to search through that, in this case, would want to search through your garbage, you've resigned that to no longer be your property, and it's free for all.
Right, and this does pertain to, let's say, mail scanning services, which is something that we're discussing in all of this.
Absolutely, and that's what really people need to understand. These mail scanning services, they are putting all of your information up in the cloud. There's two threats people need to consider. One is this third-party doctrine that if there's any investigation or whatever, any curiosity, so forth, of your information, third-party doctrine has full access of that information, infinitely stored in that cloud service without your knowledge or consent. Then the other piece is the bad actors, that database being compromised, breached, in all of that information. Then that's another part of this as well, being accessed and then put into the dark web databases that can then be cross-referenced later when someone is doing a dossier or doing research on a specific target.
Right. And so what Dallas offers in his services is he can, among other things, receive your mail for you, send you a scan, and potentially send the actual physical mail. So we'll get more to your service in a moment. Just want to help people appreciate the importance of these kinds of services. So we have most people, I would say everybody, ideally you have a secondary address which you can give out. Let's say you need something shipped to you, or maybe you want to use it as some kind of an address on with some institution or company. You want to have a secondary address that you can give out so you don't have to give your own home address. And in the US, you have post office boxes, you have UPS boxes. Maybe there are some kind of independent local services that will receive a mailbox for you. Just maybe give people an idea. What are some of the limitations of these kinds of low-hanging fruit? The limitations are that, let's say, a post office box, that's not going to be able to serve as an address for a bank account or something like this. And the post office will have problems with maybe might have a problem with receiving packages from particular services. It's not going to be able to forward your packages necessarily. Same for, let's say, a UPS box. They might be, for example, picky about the name on the package. Again, it might not serve as a real legitimate address for a bank account or something like this. And then, so let's get then to the distinction between, let's say, we have these designations like a PMB, a CMRA. Maybe you could just explain some of the differences and how, let's say, what PrivacyPost.io is doing is kind of the most legitimate form of those.
Okay, so yeah, let's back up to what your clarification and get me guiding this clarification on the PO box. So the limitations of a PO box, this is really important. PO boxes, I do not recommend anybody use a PO box unless you just need something for receiving payments or something like that, or invoices. They're so limited. You cannot call the post office and say, "Hey, I'm waiting for this important check. Could you check my box and see if it's in there?" They're not going to. Maybe if it's a small town post office and Earl who runs it, maybe, but any other situation, it's really going to be hard to have that level of service to really, be watching a box and ask, "Oh, I got this big package coming in," or whatever. Let me know when it's received, or so forth. So those are one of the limitations of the PO box. The other limitation, as you touched on, any UPS, any FedEx, any Amazon orders that will go through anything other than the post office, you cannot use a PO box. They won't receive them. They will not accept them. And then also your advanced features of scanning the mail as it comes in and so forth. Maybe, I don't think even the notification service through the post office works for a PO box. That's only to your home address. So those are those limitations. So let's talk a little bit about PMB. PMB is a private mailbox. Basically, that is a PO box that is held through a third party that then provides that service to you. The requirement of that third party to be an official PMB is they need to be registered with the post office as a CMRA, a commercial mail receiving agency. They are basically deputized by the post office to receive your mail on your behalf and then distribute it to you, either forward it or virtual digitally. So there's certain requirements that need to take place for a CMRA, and then that address, when a CMRA is done correct, a CMRA address then is registered in this USPS database for anyone to go look at and see that, oh, this is not a real address. This is not an apartment. This is not an office. This is a commercial mail receiving agency. Banks will look at that. When they do an account check for a personal bank account, they will make sure that it's a residential address and that it is not a CMRA. They'll see that within that. Now, in full disclosure, PrivacyPost and WorldPost are not officially a CMRA yet. We have put in the paperwork a long time ago, and we're still working on some address issues with the city and the post office. All the mail's received. We don't have any problems with that. But as far as that official designation as a CMRA, we are still waiting for that designation so that it shows up in the CMRA database.
You've gone through the process of, you've seen the belly of the beast, as it were, right? I think a lot of people don't realize just how heavily regulated sending and shipping things in the U.S. is. The U.S. Post Office was actually one of the strongest federal institutions in the early years of the federal government, and I believe to this day it still has a monopoly on shipping and sending letters, for example. So it's a very powerful institution. You can't just send and receive things, right? There's a whole apparatus that's built up, and I'm just curious if you have any. How difficult has it been? Are there any interesting things, insider things that you have learned that kind of point out just how weird and bizarre this is?
Well, I think there's a few things. People need to understand that since 9/11, Every letter, every package sent through the postal service, the front and back is scanned and archived. Okay, they are tracking all of that. They're scanning it. That goes into some huge database somewhere, and that is part of this mass collection of data that is being collected about us. So anybody that's worried about using a third party service, the post office already has it. Now then the argument it would be, or the question would be, is the post office going to secure that better than one of these third party services? Maybe, I don't know. So just people need to take that into consideration. So what happens is when people want to use a CMRA, a PMB service, and this happens to a lot of people, of the privacy enthusiasts that contact us for a mailbox. They think it's going to be off the radar. It's going to be stealth. It can't be. Your information we need two identifications. We need to record all of that. And we can talk a little bit more the minutia, how we secure that. That's how we're different than other services. But we need that identity. You need to prove who you are to use our service. You can't just use us anonymously. And that is really hard to do unless you have a friend or a family member or something like that will let you use an address. So that's really important for people to understand, is we need to collect this on what's called a 1583. Anybody's interested, go do a search on 1583 2023, because they've updated the form. And it's easier now to fill out, and it's a little bit more comprehensive. And the information they're collecting, we have to take all that information and copies of your identification to prove who you are. And so it's really important that people need to understand that.
So yeah, that's a really good point, Dallas, that when people reach out to you, they should expect that they're going to have to give up information. This is not a totally anonymous or private service. What you're offering with PrivacyPost.io is a way to have a secondary address, so you can start giving that out to others and have the privacy benefits of having that secondary address. So you will have to give some things to PrivacyPost.io, including some ID. Maybe at this point, just explain what PrivacyPost.io offers.
I don't know. Let's maybe assume people understand what these cloud virtual mail services, digital mailboxes. They go by a few different names. What they offer. So we offer those same services. However, we minimize what data actually goes to the cloud in the clear. So everything we do, we maintain privacy of PII. What would that be? Personal identifiable information is encrypted and is not just in the clear in the cloud. It's not in a third party service. It's not in Dropbox. It's not in Google Drive. It is in cloud services, but it is in a end-to-end encrypted zero knowledge format. So that's really important for people to understand that. So with that, that requires a lot more manual services and a lot more. It's a lot of the automation that's within these digital mailbox services are not available when you're providing things at that level of privacy. Especially when I think it's really important when you're looking at the contents of mail. I'm less concerned about the external portion of your mail, of what you received. It's the contents of the mail that really would puts a heightened level of privacy on what the contents of that mail is. So, because the post office, when they scan your mail through informed delivery or through their, prying eyes, they never see what's inside the mail. They're only scanning, the to and the from, and recording that forever. So whether they're doing it or a third party's doing it, I'm less inclined about that part, but it's what the content is. Now, in the full level of privacy with PrivacyPost.io, even your mail, when we receive it, we are sending that to you, a picture of the envelope through Proton. So we are not even storing that in any database that's in the clear.
All right, Dallas. So just give people a sense of what are some of the ways that they can benefit from a service like privacy.io.
I would have to say that I think many people that inquire about privacy PrivacyPost.io, they respect their privacy. They have a high regard, and they don't want their information to be dragnetted, or they don't want their information to be disclosed into some type of breach. But a lot of people, I think, when it comes to realizing the cost to do something like this, they then shy away from it, and they really can't cost justify it, especially if they're not nomadic, if they're not a perpetual traveler, or if they do not have, I hate this is way over too way overused in the privacy realm, but a threat model that justifies it. Then I think they have a hard time, selling themselves and justifying the cost of this service. I didn't necessarily pivot, but I added the service as a world post to kind of mediate that and bring some more people on that would, don't need that level of privacy completely like PrivacyPost, but there's kind of a hybrid, middle of the ground option that they can choose.
So PrivacyPost.io is basically offering you a secondary address that is a legitimate address that has a lot of great privacy practices that a lot of these other companies do not have. And you'll have to go back to the previous episode for some of that. But I'm looking at the prices here. There's a package that is $120 a year now. That would not include necessarily having your mail forwarded to you. So that's usually an additional cost with these sorts of things if you want to have your actual mail forwarded to you. Talk for a moment, Dallas, about what is a registered agent, and do you serve as a registered agent?
Yes, we do operate as a registered agent as well. So a registered agent is every state requires in different ways for people to have a registered agent, unless they meet specific requirements. Every state could be a little different, but generally speaking, if you are not a resident of that state, you need a third party to represent you at your LLC registration within the state's website, and that's what a registered agent would do is register on your behalf. The other advantage to a registered agent is if they respect privacy and you understand your level of privacy when your entity, your LLC, is registered in that state, you can make it in most states. No, let me rephrase that. In some states, including South Dakota, many you cannot. You can be completely anonymous in that state registry of who you are. Your name and your home address or your personal address or your business address can be completely anonymous and protected. And I have to tell you, South Dakota is awesome on protecting the privacy and they totally get it, and they totally respect the privacy of the entity that's registering. Now that could be a completely different episode when you talk about the Corporate Transparency Act, and that's not a public database, but that's now kind of impacting people who shield their privacy with an LLC. But setting that aside for now, from a state level, a registered agent creates a layer of privacy that is definitely worth its price. Most registered agents are over 100 to 200. We do it to give it as a benefit to our subscribers. We do it at a much lower price. We do it for $50, which is it's a very fair price for a registered agent. And we won't get into the minutia of commercial or non-commercial registered agent, why you would want a commercial. We are a non-commercial by design. Why, if you would need a commercial or non-commercial, most people that are listening to this podcast, they don't need a commercial. They're fine with a non-commercial. People can reach out to me and wonder what the difference is and what would be the benefit, or they can just do a quick web search and they can get a clear explanation of the difference between the two.
So let's talk about some nomad questions, because to me, it makes the most sense if you're a nomad to make use of a CMRA like, or soon to be CMRA like PrivacyPost.io. For the average person, there are benefits, obviously. I was recently reading Michael Bazel's new book, and he says that he deals with a lot of people these days who have OnlyFans accounts, and they have, I guess, customers ship them things and they don't even want their customer to know what state they live in. So they have a CMRA in a different state, and then they send that from that CMRA to their own state. So it does give you a ton of separation in that way. I guess we also know what Michael Bazzell is doing these days. Let's move on to the even more obvious use case of a service like this. So there's a reason why you have PrivacyPost in South Dakota, and that is because South Dakota has a very interesting opportunity where you can become a nomad, can have this legitimate address, such as privacypost.io. And as long as you are not claimed by any other state, and you can honestly say that you're a nomad, then this can be your official address for taxation and legal and whatever other reason. Am I correct in that?
You are, and things even from our last episode that we did 2 years ago almost, things have changed dramatically on South Dakota, and we've got a little bit of a black eye, but we have overcome all of those obstacles in our model, and again, that's probably a whole other episode in that. But people really need to do their research whenever they choose a state, whether it's Florida, Texas, South Dakota. Those seem to be the top three. Just going there and getting a digital mailbox and saying, okay, I'm a resident, I'm good to go. I'm a resident of Florida now. I'm going to put that on my tax, my IRS federal filing, and I'm good to go. You're not. It will work until it doesn't. And if it depends on your situation and what state you're in, there could be complications that come back and bite you. That's something important to consider. Now, what I want to clarify, though, let's back up. When you said we are a CMRA, we are registered with the post office. We have all the paperwork. We meet all the requirements with the postmaster here in Sioux Falls. We have not been entered into the national database yet for CMRAs. If any mail we receive, we are registered as a CMRA. We have met all the requirements with the post office, with the postal service to be a CMRA. We are having some issues with the designation of our address. The address is registered into I don't want to get too into the minutia here, into the USPS, but we are being very careful of how we do not want our entire address to be listed as a CMRA. We have possession of the entire 112 South Main address, and if we don't do this properly with the Postal Service, they are going to blanket the entire 112 address as a CMRA, and we don't want that to happen. So we're being very diligent and very careful with them. They're working with us on this. They're totally cool with it. I just met with them a couple weeks ago, and now we're working with the city to designate the suites within the building that meets the requirements so that it can go to the national database so when you type in Suite B of 112 South Main, it pops up automatically. Oh, yep, that exists in the USPS database. Only right now 112 South Main shows up in the database. Anything that's addressed to 112 South Main comes to us. We get everything. Nothing gets sent back. We don't have any issues with that. If people want to designate their suite for mail forwarding or something, it gets a little sticky there, and that's what we're dealing with. I just want to be fully transparent on that piece of it.
Yeah, that's fine. Just sticking on the particular topic of nomad residency. So one of the requirements of being a nomad within the U.S. and claiming South Dakota as your residency is that obviously you have no claim to be a resident somewhere else, and then you will need to have signed up for one of these post office services in South Dakota. So currently, could people use PrivacyPost as that service?
Absolutely. Many, many people do. We have people coming in every week to go through the entire process to make South Dakota their domicile state, their state of residency. The best way to do this is to actually fly into South Dakota and do the minimum requirements of one overnight. Go to the DPS, which is the DMV here, get your driver's license. In about an hour, you walk out with a freshly minted driver's license in your hand. If you have a vehicle, you can go then down to the county and register it with new plates and title registration. You can transfer your title, and that is just more evidence, more intent, more proof that you are now a resident of South Dakota. Now, as far as there's some of the minutia of that's changed in the last couple of years. There's a lot on the Reddit forums and just doing Google searches about being a W-2 employee in South Dakota. We have workarounds for that, but that is something that is a discussion, and that's where it requires some professional services and a consultation to talk about that plan. It's not as easy as it used to be. They've changed the rules and stuff so that the W-2 employees run into some obstacles when their company claims South Dakota for the unemployment insurance charges or fees, whatever taken out, the premiums taking out of your check. There's some minutia with that's slowing people down, and it's actually disenchanted a few people from South Dakota. But if South Dakota is your best bet, we can work with you on that.
Yeah, so this is a bit of a extreme maneuver to become a resident of South Dakota. The benefits are that you have a legitimate address in a state that, for example, doesn't have income tax, and that you can kind of go about your life as a nomad and have a legitimate address that is a place that you're not necessarily spending time at. There are consequences, though, to changing your residency to a different state. All states in the U.S. have different laws, so things such as retirement, and if you're a W-2, and all these sorts of things have consequences. So obviously it's not for everybody, and you should certainly consider those types of things. But if you're an independent spirit and you work for yourself and all these sorts of good things, then this is definitely for especially those people to consider. Specific question here. When people in the US get a driver's license, usually they have a thing where they can register to vote. And question is, does registering you to vote sign you up for jury duty?
Yes, it does. So in South Dakota, you are signed up for jury duty. I have not had any of my clients yet informing me, nor have I seen an email of a jury duty call. I've seen it from other states when they have their mail forwarded come through here, but I've not seen any jury duty requests. Now, I have heard anecdotally that they filter out PMB addresses for jury duty, so they don't query those people with a PMB address. And to clarify that, when you do change your residency over in South Dakota, you have to have on your driver's license PMB. You cannot say, I don't want people to know I have a PMB. I'm going to change that to apartment, APT, or I'm going to change that to suite. It has to be PMB. They will allow nothing else. I've had some super privacy nerds come through here, and they died on that hill trying to get a driver's license that didn't have PMB on it. So it's very important to understand that piece. But anyway, yes, and so the likelihood of getting requested or getting, I don't know what you call it, called to jury duty is low. And I would imagine that one could even if they do get called to jury duty, they could just say, hey, I'm out of the country. I can't perform jury duty at this time. Put me back in queue or back in line or whatever. I'm going to be out of the country, or I'll be traveling for the next 2-3 months or indefinitely, don't know how long. They're going to take you off the list.
Right. And I think you mentioned that there might be some other issues pertaining to voting and having a PMB address in South Dakota.
Nope. Yes, there is. If you look at the headlines of Reddit and other services out there, everything is South Dakota doesn't like nomads anymore. You can't vote there. We've solved that problem. We have been working with the county auditor, because that's where the voting takes place. They're the ones that are the gatekeepers of the voting, and we do have solutions for people that really, really want to vote. And everything is in place. Everything is transparent. We've informed them what our plan is and how it works. And so far, everything is going as planned for people that want to vote. And it's really important for people to understand too, the checklist of changing your residency state is not only registering to vote, but voting. That's very important. You have to show that your intent of being a new state is actually voting. Just registering to vote, it's not like you check that box off and say, okay, I'm good. Nope, you have to vote.
Interesting. Good insider information. You mentioned last time the issue with car insurance. And if people are not actually in the state of South Dakota and they have car insurance, then that can be a bad thing. So is being a nomad then in South Dakota only for people who own an RV?
So that's also some dramatic changes with that car insurance thing. First of all, something that has been brought to light that people need to understand is there's a lot of push now. There's some of the services, I won't say their names, that really are directing people to Florida because they're more friendly with the W-2 and the voting and stuff like that. People have been telling me the nightmares of the cost of insurance in Florida because of all of the I guess the weather occurrences, also the thefts and stuff like that. Your insurance for your car or your RV out of Florida, from what I've been told, is dramatically higher. Now, the thing with we have quite a few people here that are taking it upon themselves to solve their South Dakota insurance challenge, and I leave it up to our clients to solve that problem and work with their agent on how to solve that. But one of the requirements is they have a residential address in South Dakota. We can provide them a residential address in South Dakota. How they utilize that address is up to them. I am not going to advertise and tell you, yes, you can get car insurance, you just need this residential address. That's really up to the requirements of the agent and the underwriter and so forth. So that's really the key thing, is I'm not going to promise people can get insurance with the South Dakota address, but we can provide a residential address, and then people can take it upon themselves to figure out how to get the insurance.
I think that we can move on to Portugal and some other questions. Are there any topics that we didn't discuss pertaining to South Dakota that you would like me to ask?
I don't think so, but I would like to just reiterate one thing. If people, it's a big leap to start in Portugal, or I'm sorry, in South Dakota to take that leap, if wherever you are, to make South Dakota your address. I don't want to sell people that you have to choose South Dakota. I would rather, if people say, "Oh, that's too big of a step for me in my journey of privacy or becoming digital nomad," even if someone goes to their local mom and pop, postal annex or pack and ship store, get a mailbox there and start getting their Amazon sent there, getting all their mail sent there, going in there once, every 2 weeks to pick up their stuff, build rapport with them, open your boxes when you're there so they see that, you're not doing any shady stuff, and that is much more valuable than just doing nothing. Okay, so I really want to preface that people, this isn't just saying to come to South Dakota or use our service. Now you have to go through the minutia of the details of, yes, you're going to give them, they probably don't have a level of privacy there. They're probably running everything on, Windows, old Windows machines that are unlicensed, and where's your 1583 and so forth. And yeah, they took a photocopy of your IDs. Where are they going to put that? Where are they going to store it? Probably it's not going to be as secure, but that is far better than doing nothing at all, in my opinion.
Yes. So just to conclude that, everybody should have some kind of secondary address, even if that's just a UPS box, or more ideally, as you were saying, some of the more independent shops in the area. Everybody should have an address like that. And the very serious privacy people should be considering South Dakota, within the US anyway. So let's talk a moment about your World Post service. Just explain what that worldpost.io is about.
Yeah, so worldpost.io, that was created late last year, mid last year, because I have a lot of invested in a lot of infrastructure and a lot of process for PrivacyPost, and the sign up and rate and the people joining it wasn't meeting the budgetary requirements to maintain and keep the lights on in all reality. And it's such a laborious process of doing things manually that I needed to scale up to justify having this service here in South Dakota. And I was missing out on a lot of people that are looking for mail service and so forth that don't necessarily need that high level. They don't care. They need that level of privacy. So I started another suite, dedicated suite within the 112 address, and that is more of the typical cloud service for your digital mailbox and your virtual mail. However, having said that, where I stand out different than these other services is a lot of our privacy that we have on the PrivacyPost side, we have moved over to and deployed that within the regular digital mailbox service. And so we provide levels and layers of privacy that nobody else does. And the nice thing about that is when you get into the other commercial services, the cloud services, things can be given. It's so much easier to scale. It's so much easier to provide more affordable services in those other services. So that has really opened the door to bringing in business and keeping our passion, our niche of PrivacyPost running, but then have this ancillary income revenue stream coming in that we can continue offering PrivacyPost to those people that really want that privacy, or they can move over something more affordable to the World Post side. And I don't know if probably don't have the time, but the level of privacy, we keep all of 1583, all the identification, all of those key aspects off of the cloud when we do the World Post side. None of that stuff is in the cloud. And people also have the option in the World Post side, if they want to have something sent to them over Proton, they can request a Proton send of, let's say, a financial document or a banking document, and that doesn't touch any aspect of the cloud.
Yeah, so let me just ask that a different way. I appreciate the insight, but what exactly is the use case for WorldPost.io?
So World Post competes with the regular services that are out there at the regular prices. So World Post, we provide the digital mail services and the residency services to people that really don't have that strong requirement of the levels of privacy. They just want convenience. And most of them have a strategy. They're either digital nomads, perpetual travelers. We have a lot of people that are FSOs, foreign service officers, that use our service, and we provide them. They didn't even aware of it when they signed up, but we provide them a level of privacy. That's where we do a lot of hybrid stuff. But so mostly on the World Post side of those people that want a digital mail service, and they wanted it at an affordable price.
And is this for Americans, people in Portugal? What's the use case here?
Very interesting that you ask that. To my surprise, we have quite a few internationals who need a presence here in the U.S. because they're getting U.S. bank accounts and credit cards, and they are not doing it fraudulently. They are getting into the banking, 8-lane express highway of the U.S. by starting with either an LLC or an individual account, mailbox here in the US, and then they're starting their journey to establish credit cards here, business credit cards, and so forth, and bank accounts. So we have quite a few of international people using the services. We also have quite a few people who are running fulfillment by Amazon. We do a lot of the returns we do all the returns for specific clients where they use this address for their return address, and then we don't do fulfillment yet. We would do that if there was a situation where that arose, but no one's asked for that. But we do the returns. We process the returns for them that people have to return when they mail in their returns. So yeah, it's all over the board, Gabe. And we also do, ironically, because of my ties with Portugal, we do have quite a few expats, internationals that are U.S., the Americans that have moved to Portugal that use our service as well.
Right. You said in the last episode that you spend some time in Portugal. For people especially interested in maybe moving or being a nomad, what's so special about Portugal?
I don't have an affinity towards Portugal itself. Really, my goal with Portugal is it's the easiest access for many countries to get an EU passport. My ultimate goal is to have an EU passport. So I am free and clear to spend as much time as I want in the EU countries and the Schengen countries. As a U.S. passport holder, we get these, instant visas, travel visas, tourist visas, but they're only good for 90 days. and it's a rolling 90 days. It's kind of complicated, but it's very to figure that out or keep track of that. And there are some European countries where you go over that 90 days more than even 3 days, you can be blocked from all EU countries for a period of years. They don't mess around with that, especially the northern countries. I call it the Maginot Line above France, or France and above. France is kind of still a little bit, anyways, these Germany, the Netherlands, and so forth. They are really strict about that 90 days. So getting that passport and getting that EU passport is a goal of mine. Definitely, that's the primary goal.
No, I mean, is it the golden visa in
Good question. Well, it's the D residency, D7, D8. It's kind of complicated, Gabe. It's really hard. I would just say, to be an international, to become a resident of Portugal, overall is very easy. Of all of the EU countries, in my opinion, Portugal is the easiest to get residency. To start that, once you get your Portugal passport, you're golden for the rest of the EU. The other thing that's really important to understand is you start spending time in Portugal, you have a strategy to do your healthcare there, your bigger healthcare and stuff, your medications. You get your medications 10 cents on the dollar in the US. Without insurance, you pay cash. It's 10 cents on the dollar from what you probably pay for your deductible here. Your insurance is your healthcare there is premium for private healthcare. Awesome service at a fraction. My insurance premium for private healthcare in Portugal is €50, $50 a month, and I get better care there than I would get at my age of probably $800 a month here in South Dakota for one of the ACA plans.
What is that like, just traveling around the Schengen area in Europe? Is that just seamless? Nobody's asking for ID, etc.?
Yeah, you go through a separate line. You'll notice if you haven't before, with internationals that are traveling through other, they still do some basic verifications, but you get a line for EU citizens. It's short, it's fast. I think a lot of times it's just maybe even a facial scan these days, but you can go through those lines really fast. You can stay there as long as you want. You can change your residency to an EU country just with a few forms. You can change your tax residency, to France, to Germany, to Croatia, or where these new EU countries very seamlessly. And once you become a resident of one of the other countries, it's easier to open bank accounts. It's easier to get rental, to rent a property and so forth once you get that citizenship in the EU. It's almost like, be within the states here, moving from one state to another. As a U.S. citizen, it's much easier to do that when you're a U.S. citizen versus if you were an international and then you want to go from one state to another. There's a little more complicated.
Gotcha. Just a few broader privacy questions here. A lot of times people in the US, have to give their social security number for certain things. And an EIN number is the same number of characters. It is what a business can register to get an EIN number. Are there any strategies that you're aware of for using an EIN number in place of an SSN?
Yeah. I don't personally deploy that strategy, but I've heard people doing that when there's certain, they just need I call it a TIN because that's the overall term of tax identification number. TIN covers the broad term of EIN, which is an entity number for an LLC, whatever, and an SSN. And if they're not actually going into a database and checking and so forth to see if that's a personal number, I think you're fine to do that. I don't run into many situations where people are asking for a TIN in my situation, but if people are, that I think that's a great strategy. I've heard of that strategy before, and I think that's a brilliant way to do it.
And the Corporate Transparency Act, this tyrannical act that basically is threatening to destroy the private LLC in the U.S. so that you are going to be required, if you have an LLC in the U.S., to report the beneficial owner of the company. I'm just curious your thoughts on that. Any I'm sure you've had to deal with it in your business, but also just your thoughts on this. And is there any hope?
In my opinion, it's not as bad as people are all making it out to be. There's a couple reasons. Okay, this is FinCEN, and this is a private database. FinCEN has done fairly well with keeping their data secure. However, they've had some leaks, I think mostly through inside whistleblowers and so forth have leaked information from the FinCEN databases. But the other piece to this too is we already have to give that all to the IRS. The IRS has all that information. Granted, that's just another database for our information to be stored in that's just ripe to be compromised or whatever. But we already have to disclose that when we create an EIN, when we file our taxes. They know everything and all the details of what percentage of that company that you own from the IRS level. And what I have been told by people that are in the know within these agencies, they intentionally keep these databases separate. They're separate silos, even though the information is duplicated. They keep it siloed so that it's more secure. Now, maybe that's debatable, but so yes, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I'm not happy about it, but I don't think it's the end of privacy or the end of using an LLC to create another shield of privacy. And what I had a long discussion with a lawyer about this, and he said, you know what? Trusts are not part of the Corporate Transparency Act. So unless that changes, unless that has changed, people can then deploy a trust structure if that's their concern.
Gotcha. I think we can wind it down here, Dallas, unless there's another topic that you are itching to discuss.
I think that's good. I think if I would just like to preface two really important pieces here, and that's why I'm more than happy to come back on your show. And thank you, Gabe, for having me on. Again, two pieces is time is money. When people are reaching out to me and they have all these minutia questions, all these detailed questions, and all these variables, and we go back and forth, and I take the time to answer these. Please respect my time and don't ghost. Be serious. If you really need a service and you really want to move forward, engage in this depth of conversation. Okay, please don't waste my time. And secondly, I think it's really important. I mean, even just now, this latest breach with all our almost every American social security numbers are now exposed and the details of them. And I can tell you, Gabe, I am already clients of my services are getting credit cards they did not order. It's already happening. And I suspect it has to do with that major breach. So anytime we can mitigate what is put out in these cloud services, we can protect our identity. I don't think it's too late, especially if we're doing a reboot or if we've moved to a new address or kids have graduated and you're moving on to a new life, with kidless or empty nesting. If you want to do a reboot or a reset, now is the time to really be thinking about keeping your information off of these cloud services.